The first journal of Simon Fraser from April 12th to July 18th, 1806, first edited for publication by Kaye Lamb in 1960. At the time he penned this journal, 30-year-old Simon Fraser had been an employee of the Northwest Company for 14 years, his career having commenced with his enlistment at the age of 16 and culminated with his acquisition of a partnership in that company in 1801. In 1805, Fraser followed Sir Alexander Mackenzie's earlier 1789 route west across the Rocky Mountains via the Peace River, which runs through what is now northwest Alberta and northeast British Columbia. There, he established Rocky Mountain Portage House at the eastern end of the Peace River Canyon, opposite the river from present-day Hudson's Hope, British Columbia. Before undertaking his epic 1808 journey down the Fraser River, the waterway that would come to bear his name, Fraser explored the Peace, Parsnip, Nechako, and Stuart rivers, the Stuart being a tributary of the Nechako, and the Nechako being a tributary of the Fraser. This journal chronicles Fraser's 1806 treks from Rocky Mountain Portage to McLeod Lake, and from McLeod Lake to the Nechako River. Fraser uses several outdated or decontextualized terms and names in his journal which require interpretation. The Little Head, to which he often refers, was a Sekani Indian chief. The term Bisha designates a doe, or female deer. Orignal means moose or elk. Carcajun means wolverine. Trout Lake refers to what is now McLeod Lake. Finlay's branch is the Finlay River. The eastern branch is the Parsnip River, and the small river is the Pack River. The surviving text of this journal is incomplete and begins mid-sentence. Part 1, at Rocky Mountain Portage, Saturday, April 12th, 1806. But as it is here now, we will find use for it. We cannot be too well stocked with provisions. About midnight sent off 3 men to return to Dunvegan. As it snows too much night, gave them as provisions 94 pounds fresh meat. Sunday, April 13th. Fine mild weather. Mr. John Stuart and I, having wrote to Mr. Archibald Norman McLeod after dark when it began to freeze, sent off 2 men with the letters. Gave them 160 pounds fresh meat on account of their having had 12 days that Mr. Stuart had taken to bring up himself and baggage from Dunvegan. The other 2 men, Basile and Gervais Rivard, remain here, they being intended for the expedition, and were hired for that purpose below. That is, if there was not a sufficient number otherwise hired at this place. If there were, they were to go down. But there are only 3 as yet hired, so we will have occasion for them, and they were sent to the Little Head to bring home whatever he may have. Monday, April 14th. Brisset arrived from the Little Head, and etc. He brought 2 côtés de boeuf full of pounded meat, and says the Indians killed 14 cows, and are busy reducing them into pounded meat, and that the Little Head asks some tobacco. Bason sprained his hand so much that he is not able to make use of it. Lalande arrived from the Beaver Lake, and says that La Ramée got there only yesterday. Tuesday, April 15th. Made up 5 bales of goods to be sent over the Rocky Mountain Portage, immediately on the snow. Fine weather. Wednesday, April 16th. Fine mild weather. Early in the morning, Bason and Lalande were sent to the upper end of the portage. The latter had a piece, and the former about 1/2, on account of his having the road to beat and a sore hand besides. After this trip, each man will be able to take 2 pieces. About 9 a.m. Mr. John McKenvin arrived from the Meadow Indians after an absence of 70-odd days. He informs us of his having starved much at different times. He accompanied the Indians far off in search of beaver, but though they saw many beaver lodges, they killed but few on account of the depth of snow, which is from 5 to 6 feet deep in the beaver country. They saw no large animals of any kind, no, not even a track, during their long and intricate route until within 2 days' march of the upper end of the portage. At the place they returned, the Indian showed him the place where Trout Lake was, and told him it was only 3 encampments distant from there, but he could get no one to accompany him there. The distance these Indians have to go in search of beaver, and the misery they endure to go there, and from there to come here, proves this plan to be of little use. Could it be done, it would certainly be more proper to send them all to Trout Lake, where beaver is near the fort, and it is certain they will never work well until they have an establishment formed in the beaver country. Mr. Mackenzie saw some of the Indians of Trout Lake who had made pretty good hunts and were on their return to Mr. James McDougall's. He says that some of them are coming down here, but I believe this is a mistake. It is likewise reported that some of the big men, Trout Lake Indians, killed one of the carriers last fall on the latter's land, which, if true, may be of some detriment to our expedition. Argenton, who accompanied our hunters without leave when they went off the 29th of last month to join their relatives, returned with Mr. Mackenzie and brought a slave woman, who followed him of her own accord, with him. In order to prevent the Beaver Indian 7 from taking a footing, or those of this place, and to prevent others from coming for women, she was taken from him, as well as his gun, blanket, axe, dog, bow, and arrows, and etc., and he was sent off in that defenceless manner to the Little Head. However, he did not go without some reluctance, and Mr. Stuart conducting him out of the house and down the hill with a kick. The woman cried most bitterly after his departure, and we kept a strict watch over her that she may not escape and go after him. It is really surprising the attachment these women have to the Beaver Indians, with whom they are little better than slaves. For my own part, I cannot account for it unless it be that they are well fed, for in every other respect they are certainly much better off with their own relations, who never ill-use them, and with whom they are mistress of everything, and yet there is scarcely one among them that would not rather go with the Beaver Indians. Late this evening, Gagnon and Saucier, the 2 men who were sent for bark, arrived and brought only 2 small rolls, scarcely worth anything. They say they spoiled upwards of 20, good bark, on account of its not seasoning well, but it is most probable that they do not know how to season it properly, it being their first experience. Thursday, April 17th. Early this morning, Gagnon went over to the other end of the Portage with 1 piece, and Bazin arrived, and Lalande remained there making a cache. It was Massy de Danse de Béguet that killed this Indian, but it was of no detriment at all to us. I have seen his bones, which is well desiccated. The carriers are naturally mild, but subject to gusts of passion, which often prove fatal to one or the other. One brother thinks nothing of killing another, and the others seldom interfere. Got a grill made today to dry the split meat that is in the slangard. In the evening, gave Saucier 2 pieces to take over the Portage, that he may start in the night, it being then the roads are best. Bason goes with him to meet the Indians, who we expect will soon arrive, to get what provisions they may have at the other end of the Portage, as it will save them the trouble of sending it over again. Friday, April 18th. In the course of last night, the slave woman deserted and appears to have gone before her relations. About 10 o'clock a.m., Basile and Gervais Rivard, who were at the Little Head, arrived. They brought the value of 6 skins, pounded meat, 5 ditto dried meat, 4 of greasy, and say they left the Indians at La Malice's river on their way here. Much about the same time, Farcier arrived from the Beaver Lake, and says they caught only 1 white fish, and that this is the 3rd day since they ate anything. He returned immediately with 30 pounds of fresh meat for La Ramée, with orders to be back tomorrow. In the morning, Lalande came over from the other end of the Portage, and returned immediately with 2 pieces. In the evening the 2, Gervais Lagarde and Gervais Rivard and Gagnon, went off likewise, each with 2 pieces except the latter, who had only 1 on account of his. Having one of the pieces he got yesterday morning near this end, and that he is to take in passing, which will form the same load with the others. sent word to Basin to come home in order to be sent to the Little Head, with orders to make him hunt. Saturday, April 19th. After breakfast, sent Mr. Mackenzie to look for the Meadow Indians, as we apprehend they will not come to the house in time enough, and besides, the woman that deserted might tell them a parcel of stories and frighten them off. The men who went over the Portage yesterday returned today, excepting McLeod, whom Mackenzie took with him to the Indians. Sunday, April 20th. Early this morning the two Gervais, Lalande and Saucier went off with 2 pieces each, and Gagnon remained here to wait for Mr. Stuart and myself. Sent Basin to the Little Heads and etc., to see what they are doing and make them hunt. He had a foot of tobacco for Little Head. About noon Farcier arrived from the Beaver Lake, and brought a white fish, which is all he says they caught. At the same time, a boy came from the Little Heads to advertise us of their having killed 6 bishes, 2 of which are not in cachet. Sent Farcier, whom I reprimanded for remaining so long at the Beaver Lake, to arrange them as La Pistole, who was there, is gone farther on for 2 small red deer, alias biche. Monday, April 21st. The men who went over with pieces returned today. In the morning, Basin and La Pistole arrived with the 2 red deer, which weighed 300 pounds, and soon after, just as we were at breakfast, Little Head, Raquette Relevée, etc. arrived. The former, being requested to come here, was well received, but the others who came without permission were treated in a harsh manner, and Mr. Stuart, having previously asked my permission, which was readily granted, to the force of argument, added another kind of logic, which soon cleared the house, and they took to their heels accompanied by the Little Heads women. At Dunvegan they were forbid to come here, and they promised not to come, but they did not keep to it, so it was but right to punish them for their disobedience, and it was more proper to be done by Mr. Stuart, who had a principal hand in settling them below, than any other. Farcier arrived after putting the 2 red deer last killed in cachet. He brought home the rump of one, which weighed 60 pounds. Sent La Pistole and Argenton, who got his bow and arrows and a gun, lent him to go beyond the Grand Fourche to look for 2 cows that were put in cache about the middle of January, and could not be found since, on account of the road having filled up with snow. Got 5 bags pemmican made of 90 pounds each, the Indians being a little composed, and returned about sunset. The Little Head began to drink. He and his followers since hereabout gave us 220 pounds. Pounded meat, 80 pounds, grease, and about 90 pounds. Dried meat, part payment, of which they are now drinking. Authorized Basin, Basile, and Gagnon to go for bark tomorrow, Gervais and Saucier, for the 2 red deer that were last put in cachet. Lagarde and Farcier to take pieces over the Portage. The former got 2 pieces, and the latter only 1, and that same he will take over on his back. Tuesday, April 22nd. Fine weather. The Little Head and followers went off towards the Beaver Lake. He misbehaved last night, for which he was much ashamed today, and did not dare come into the house. The people for bark were off early. Gave them 63 pounds of fresh meat. Lalande was sent off with 2 pieces, with orders to remain at the other end of the Portage, and take care of the property there. Saucier and Gervais arrived in the evening with 450 pounds fresh meat. In the forenoon, 4 Meadow Indians arrived from a band that is near at hand. They say they have no beaver, and brought only the value of a skin of fresh meat each, which they traded for ammunition. They kill plenty of animals, that is moose and red deer, by chasing them with their dogs when the crust. Wednesday, April 23rd. Fine weather. Menard arrived with 4 young men from the chief's band. They brought 22 beaver skins, 2 caracasaurs, and 6 pechos belonging to the chief, which are well dressed. They traded the value of 2 skins. These Indians are not Meadow Indians, but of another tribe, and the relations of the chief, who always sides with the Meadow Indians and who has much authority over them. We attempted to get some information concerning their country, but they seemed rather stupid and not much inclined to satisfy our desires, which perhaps is not a little owing to the little knowledge we have of their language, for our interpreters are none of the best. However, we understood that Finley's branch does not terminate in the chutes, falls, and rapids as reported, but with the intervening of some portages that it is navigable to its source, and from thence there is a portage about half the length of this, to a large lake called Bear Lake, where the salmon comes up, and from there is a river that falls into another much larger, according to their report larger than even the Peace River, that glides in northwest direction. In that lake they say there are plenty of fish, and that the salmon are innumerable, with plenty of bears and animals of the fur kind thereabout, but no large animals of any kind. It is from that quarter they get their ironworks and ornaments, but they represent the navigation beyond that lake as impracticable, and say there are no other Indians excepting a few of their relations that never saw white people thereabout, and to get ironworks they must go far beyond it, which they perform in long journeys on foot. We cannot imagine what river this is by their description, and judging by the course it runs, it cannot be the Columbia, and I know of no other excepting Cook's. But whatever river it is, and wherever they get these, their ironworks and ornaments are such as I have seen with the carriers. Indeed, the Indians of Nakaslayer talk of Bear Lake, and their account of the river that flows from it is conformable with that of the Meadow Indians. Sent off Menard immediately to another band of Indians, who have killed 30 moose deer, to prevent their throwing away any of the meat, and make them pound and dry it. Gave him 6 measures, powder, and 40 balls to trade. In the afternoon an elderly man arrived and advertised us that he had killed an animal in the stony islands above the house. Gave him 6 measures of ammunition as payment, and he went off immediately. Saucier and Gervais was busy all day cutting and splitting canoe wood, and after sunset they were sent off to the animal, to prevent its being ate in the course of the night. They will be back with the meat early in the morning. In the forenoon, Lagarde and Farcier arrived from the upper end of the Portage and returned immediately with 2 pieces each. Thursday, April 24th. Fine weather. Saucier and Gervais arrived early with 454 pounds of meat in the skin. I did not imagine the moose deer to be so good at this time of the year as it is, it being really fat. La Pistole and Argenton arrived and say they could not cross the Grand River to go in search of the cows on account of it being overflown and the ice broke. Argenton killed a biche a short distance this side, and La Pistole put it in a cache. La Ramée, who had been at the Beaver Lake since the 11th inst., arrived, and says he caught no fish, not knowing where the fishery is, but the little head, who he met going there, told him that he would show him where the Indians used to fish. The little head sent word several times since his departure asking to be excused, but word was always sent him that if he wished to excused, to come and excuse himself personally. Saucier and Gervais were employed about canoe wood. Got a log sword to make tables for the press. Friday, April 25th. Early in the morning, Saucier and La Ramée were sent to the Beaver Lake to ascertain whether fish can be caught or not. Saucier being a good fisherman and not lazy, I am in hopes of his being successful. Both he and Lagarde were both lately hired for the expedition across the mountains. The men who were sent for bark arrived, and brought only 22 fathoms, which is not very good. The 2 men that were at the other side of the portage with pieces arrived also. Mr. Stuart made a Gabriel, and they represent it as different from the Columbia, but say it is from that quarter that they get the most part of their goods, and that it is the only place from where they get guns and ammunition. From Nakaslay there is a water communication, with the exception of 3 portages, and they positively affirm that white people came there in the course of the summer. but as they came on discovery that they had little goods, I have seen a pistol brass mounted with powder and ball, which they say they had from them. Saturday, April 26th. This morning 4 men went for meat, and 2 for more bark, and Gervais, who remained here, worked at canoe wood. In the morning Littlehead arrived, but did not come in the house, but remained lurking about, and as there was little notice taken of him, he went off without saying a word to anyone. Sunday, April 27th. Both the men that went for meat and bark arrived. The former brought 770 pounds meat, and the latter 20 fathoms bark, but not all good. A little before sunset sent off 4 men to cross the Portage, with 7 pieces in sundry articles, our own baggage included. The road begins now to be bad, and I believe this will be the last trip with trains. Indeed, we have very few articles more to be sent over, except those which can't be sent until we decamp ourselves. Some time after dark, Mr. A.M. Gillivray and Gosselin arrived from Dunvegan and brought letters from Messrs. McLeod and J.M. Gillivray of Slave Lake, which bring good news from all quarters. Mr. A.M. Gillivray is come up to take charge of this place during the summer. It appears that J.B. Lafleur, who promised Mr. Stuart to accompany him across the mountains, could not be sent off on any condition. Malatis would not come either. Mr. McLeod did all he could to prevail on either the one or the other to come, but nothing short of violence would do. Mr. McLeod writes that had Malatis consented to come, that he would hire Cardinal for fort, but now that he will go to Montreal, and that Malatis will return there, Monday, April 28th. This has been the warmest day we have had yet this season. Sent Besson to look for a birch tree of good bark that was seen last summer by Lelot Moylan, but he did not find it. Basile, Gagnon, and Gosselin put up the press and pulled roots to make 2 bundles of watape. Tuesday, April the 29th. Fine weather. Besson gathered some gum. Basile, Gagnon, and Gosselin made bars, wedges, and masses for the fur press, and pulling up roots wherewith to make 2 bundles of watape. Wednesday, April 30th. Still fine weather. Sent Mr. Mackenzie to remain with Lalonde at the other side of the Portage and take care of the property there. We do not suspect there is any danger while there is a man there. But as Mr. Mackenzie has nothing to do, and as it would be unpardonable if anything should go wrong, while there are so many of us here, I judged it best to send him. I cannot leave this place myself. It is true that Mr. Stuart would willingly go and prepare everything for embarking, but there being no canoe-maker here, it falls to his lot to supply the place of one. The 4 men that went over last returned. In the afternoon, Saucier arrived from the Beaver Lake, starving, and says they caught no fish, though they changed places several times. He met the little head on his way there, and says he asked for tobacco and ammunition. Thursday, May 1st. Cold and cloudy weather. Mr. Stuart began the canoe, and the large seams were sound. Bark is bad. Friday, May 2nd. Still more cold. Opened the canoe and sewed the panes. In the morning, Lalonde, who arrived last night, was sent over again to remain with Mr. Mackenzie at the other side of the Portage. While there he has orders to gather gum and return here on the 5th. Saturday, May 3rd. Cold with successive showers of snow, sleet, and rain. However, in the afternoon it cleared up, and though still cold, Mr. Stuart put the varangs into the canoe. One half of the varangs were broke, and he was therefore obliged to make others to replace them. 3 young men arrived from the chief's band. They brought the value of 6 skins in sundry pieces and 1 in meat, which they traded and went off immediately. They informed us that the other band of which mention is made before does not intend to come to the fort, for which reason Basin was sent off with them to the chief's band, and there get Indians to guide him to the different bands, with instructions not to return until he brings all the Indians with him. Sunday, May 4th. Weather rather more mild. Early in the morning sent Saucier and Farcier to the Beaver Lake to tell La Ramée and the Little Head to come to the fort. Sent particular orders to La Ramée to bring the Little Head to headquarters, and told the others to take the nets out of the water and bring all the fishing tackles here, it being useless to keep people there any longer. 2 men have been employed there since the 11th of last month, to no purpose. The chief and band arrived in a starving condition. They are poor devils, quite emaciated, and paid only 66 skins beaver credit, and traded 1 original skin and the value of 5 skins. Sundry furs, most part of which furs they brought are very ill-dried, for which they got a severe reprimand. We endeavored to get some information concerning their lands, but they do not seem willing to communicate any. Indeed, our interpreters are not well versed in repeating what they say. Therefore, all we could learn from them is that they know no better place than this, and that if it is thrown away that there is no place beyond it, that they can go to make up 10 packs. But the furs are so hard and ill-dried that the packs cannot be well made. Monday, May 5th. Got 5 of the packs yesterday untied and remade them again, and after all they are so well as we could wish. In the morning, Lalonde arrived from the other end of the Portage, and soon after the ice moved and broke up in some places, but it soon stopped again, and the water rose upwards of 10 feet since yesterday. The ice is amazing, strong and thick. Gagnon gummed the canoe inside, and Mr. Stuart attempted to band it, but was obliged to leave it on account of it being too cold. Tuesday, May 6th. Weather still cold with a strong northerly wind. Gagnon and Gosselin were busily employed mending the old canoe, and the others employed about canoe wood. At noon, La Ramée, Saucier, and Farcier arrived from Beaver Lake, and as they caught no fish, brought all the fishing tackles. The lake is still covered with ice and snow. Even the borders is not dissolved. They could not persuade the Little Head to come to the fort. He told them, as he was taken no notice of the last time he was here, that he was in doubt whether he would come or not. By what we could learn from the Indians at different times, an establishment would be well placed on the big river that falls into the main branch of the Peace River, about halfway between this and the Beaver River. This river, at its confluence with the Peace River, is large, and appears to contain a large quantity of water, and the Indians say it is navigable a considerable way up, and that beaver bears and large animals of all kinds are amazing numerous. It is thereabout is what may be properly called the Meadow Indians, or as they call themselves, les gens du large, have their lands. But it is there likewise they are most subject to be killed by the Beaver Indians, of both Forks and Fort Vermilion, and on that account they seldom now remain there, but 9/10 of the year. But out in the mountains, where there is neither beaver nor anything else but badgers, and where they undergo great misery, according to their reports, there is but a very short distance from that river to a branch of Mackenzie's river that the Nakanés inhabit, with whom they have often intercourse. Most every one of them told us that if there was a fort on the banks of that big river, and if the Beaver Indians could be prevented from killing them, that they would make excellent hunts, and that it was the only good place they knew. Wednesday, May 7th. Cold weather. Sent Basile, Gosselin, and Saucier to look for and raise more bark, in case we should be in want of another canoe. Everything is got ready. Should there come more than 20 packs from Trout Lake with these of this place, one canoe cannot embark all. Gagnon and La Ramée mended the old canoe, and the others gathered 32 pounds gum, and pulled up some roots which the women made into watap. More Indians arrived and brought a few furs and etc. In the afternoon sent Lalonde to the other end of the Portage to remain with Mr. McKenvin and make poles, paddles, and etc. Thursday, May 8th. Last night it snowed a little, but the weather cleared up this morning, and though we had some showers of rain in the course of day, Mr. Stuart tried again to band the canoe, but was obliged to give up on account of it being too cold. In the forenoon, Basin arrived with a couple of Indians, and all the band he went for, about 30 men, will be here tomorrow. Menard is with them, sent Gagnon and Farcier to the Beaver Lake once more to tell the little head to come to the fort. Friday, May 9th, the weather the same as yesterday. Menard and the Indians arrived. They had a few skins beaver credit, and traded 30 with the value of 80 skins for dried provisions and 20 original skins. This is the band of Indians that were attacked last summer by the Fort Vermilion Indians, and they did not see the fort since they were at the Beaver River 2 years ago. Consequently, they never saw this place before. Last winter they went down within 2 or 3 days' march of Beaver River, but were not at the fort. I reprimanded them severely for not coming here last fall, and asked them the cause of not making a better hunt, to which they replied that they had made a few furs, but that they lost all when attacked by the Beaver Indians, and that ever since they generally kept in their lurking holes in the mountains, and that they wished to come and see white people in the fall, but did not know where to find them, there being none at Beaver, and being told that this place was abandoned in the spring, and transferred to Finlay's branch. They went there but found no one, in consequence of which they thought the white people had abandoned the country, and they then returned to their lands, where they were found in the month of March by Indians that had been out on purpose to look for them in the month of February, who informed them of there being a fort here. One of them, an old man that calls himself chief, had a billet from Chatelain for 17 skins to be paid here. Mr. Rocheplan last spring delivered a gun to La Malice to be given him as payment, but La Malice took the lock of the gun to mend that of his own, and it remains here useless. Therefore I did not pay the Indians, but told him to get payment from those to whom he gave the furs. If ever he will be paid, La Malice, of course, will pay the gun. The people who were sent for bark arrived with 3 rolls. In the evening called all the Indians to the door, to know how many there are of them, which we found to be 44 men, 30 women, and 79 boys, girls and children, and there is another band near at hand not yet arrived, and there are several gone to work the Beaver, which will form in all of these seen here about 60 men, 40 women, and upwards of 100 boys, girls, and children. Formerly they say they were much more numerous, but the Beaver Indians' war excursions continually diminished them, and the greatest loss generally fall to the share of the women, which, added to the number the Beaver and Rocky Mountain Indians continually took from them, may account for the unequal proportion there is between the men and women. Saturday, May 10th, weather still cold. I am really concerned about the backwardness of the season. The river is yet chock full of ice, and people continually crossing upon it. Made up 560 pounds pounded meat, 76 pounds grease, and 120 pounds dried meat, into bundles to be sent over the Portage tomorrow. Another pack was made, and the small canoe gummed, gave the Babbith and another Indian each 8 balls and as many shots of powder to go a-hunting. They returned in the evening, after having killed a red deer and wounding several others. Sunday, May 11th. The weather cloudy, but rather more warm than usual. In the morning sent Basile and Gosselin to rise more bark, what there is here already not being of a good quality, and in the evening they returned with 10 fathoms, seemingly pretty good. 2 men and 3 boys were sent for, and brought the red deer that was killed yesterday. The meat weighed 280 pounds. Menard and Saucier, the latter of which is sick, was sent over the Portage with the pieces that were made up yesterday. They had 13 young men with them to help them to carry the pieces. The Indians that were on this side of the river arrived. They brought only 21 skins furs, and the value of 6 in provisions. At noon Mr. McKenvan arrived from the other end, and says the river is clear of ice above the Portage. Gagnon and Farcier, accompanied by a slave boy from the Little Head, likewise arrived. They say they could not prevail on the Little Head to come, but that he promised to be here in 5 nights. Basin was employed making varangs for a small canoe, and Mr. Stuart banded the large one, but did not render all the varangs. gave the Indian boy 4 measures ammunition and 1.5 foot tobacco to take to the Little Head, with orders to be here in 3 nights, and told him likewise that a Frenchman would accompany him tomorrow morning. Gave 4 measures ammunition, with as many young men to go a-hunting tomorrow. Monday, May 12th. This morning Mr. Mackenzie went to the other end of the Portage to get the men there to split and prepare canoe wood, in case of our being obliged to make one there. The Little Head slave boy went off early. He slept in the lodges, and some say he went off without coming into the house, but others say that he went into where the man that was to accompany him was, but the lazy fellow was still asleep, and did not see him. One of the Meadow Indians says that the Little Head had said that he would not come here until he would be off for above, and all the others for below, which corresponds with the young man's going off without a Frenchman, for which reason Mr. McGillivray and Bison, guided by an Indian, were sent off with positive orders to bring the Little Head and all those that are with him here. Basile and Bosselin were sent for, and brought more bark. In the afternoon, Maynard and the young men that went over the portage with him yesterday returned. Gave each of the Indians the value of 2 skins for their pains, which will render them ready and willing to obey another time. The pauvre coupé comrade, one of the young men that were a-hunting, brought the value of 2 skins in fresh meat. The others killed nothing. They are too much afraid to do anything. They have alarms every moment, and pretend to see enemies daily. They will not stir from here until the Little Head arrives, so that he, as well as us, may assure them of the peaceable intentions of the Beaver Indians. People are still crossing upon the ice, and snowshoes are made use of in the woods. Tuesday, May 13th. In the morning, Basile, Maynard, and Gosselin were sent over to the other end of the Portage, to remain there some time, and work at canoe wood. They brought over 3 rolls of bark, and a few old putillas. Wednesday, May 14th. In the evening, Mr. McGillivray and Basin arrived from the Beaver Lake, and informed me that Little Head was coming by another route, and soon after he made his appearance, accompanied by his brother, but he left his women with the raquette relevée, etc., beyond the Beaver Lake, which renders it of no service of their coming to the fort themselves, and it was purposely to bring all that Mr. McGillivray was sent there. The raquette relevée and etc. we intended to send down in canoe to Dunvegan, according to Mr. McLeod's desire, and the Little Head was to accompany us in the quality of hunter across the mountains. But now I am afraid that neither the one or the other can take place. The Indians had a beaver robe and about a dozen of skins, but as they told Mr. McGillivray that they would come here themselves, it was not taken from them. In the morning, although the ice was very bad, the Sauter crossed when it was at the risk of her life to go after Basile to the other end of the Portage. She is more like a fury than a woman. Towards the evening, P. Dallaire arrived from Trout Lake with a letter from Mr. McDougall. He left that place the 5th inst, but was detained a long time along the road by the ice, and had a narrow escape, a bank of ice having fallen into his old penny canoe and broke it, and from there, about a day's march, he came on foot, and says, the ice was not yet broke in many places beyond the Portage. Dallaire says that when he came off, the canoe was not finished, but the packs, 13 in number, were made, and Mr. McDougall writes that he went to the Carrier's Lake and saw about 50 men on the borders of about 3.5 days' march from Trout Lake, but the distance was long and intricate by water. The above lake, he says, empties its waters into the Columbia by a small river, which is reported to be navigable. Fish abounds in the lake at certain seasons of the year, and animals of the fur kind are plenty, but large animals are scarce. The natives resemble the Ehipucans in their language and manners. Thursday, May 15th. Fine weather. The ice broke in the course of the night and drifted all this day. In the evening sent off a small canoe with the news to Dunvegan, and Mr. Mackenzie, who just arrived from the other end of the Portage, embarked in it, as he wished to see Mr. McLeod before he leaves Dunvegan, and Basin and an Indian goes down to return immediately with a small assortment of trading goods for this place, that the Indians may be supplied with ironworks, guns and ammunition, to be off early in the month of August to work the beaver. They promise to make a good spring hunt, and to be all here about the beginning of that month. La Ramée and his spouse likewise embarked. He being a free man, I thought it necessary to send him off this first opportunity in order to settle with Mr. McLeod before he leaves Dunvegan. After their departure, Mr. Stuart finished the large canoe, and at dusk the little head begged to be allowed to drink a little with a few of the slave Indians, who have some original skins to trade, and himself will drink part payment of the provisions that are due to him. He seems very willing to accompany us across the mountains, but I have no great confidence in him, and do not understand his having left his family beyond the Beaver Lake, and he seems too submissive and cringing, which makes me think that he dissembles. Friday, May 16th. The sun shone all day, but the weather was rather cold. In the morning the little head went away, and promised to be back with his family in 4 nights. Sent a man, La Pistole, with him in order to return tomorrow with some meat and a few furs the Indians have. The slave Indians traded several original skins for ammunition, after which they all decamped, excepting the Babylard and a couple of young men that remained with him to hunt for the fort during the summer, gave them but very few credits. As they seldom ever pay, it is a bad custom to give them out many debts. Made up another pack and got the canoe gummed. Saturday, May 17th. It began to rain in the course of the night last past, and did not cease all the day. In the forenoon, La Malice and Wananshish arrived from the other end of the Portage. They arrived there late last night with one man, St. Pierre, in a large canoe loaded with 14 packs from Trout Lake. All is well there, excepting that they live but very poorly. The Indians told me last fall that there was excellent fishery there in the spring of the year, but very few are caught as yet. Sent La Malice and Dallaire back to the other end of the Portage, with as many Indians as we could muster, to bring all the packs over in one trip tomorrow. 2 men, Basile and Dallaire, are to remain at the other end of the Portage to mend the old canoe there, that is to say, if they can be dispensed with, hired Wananshish for the term of 6 years, at the rate of 300 livres per annum. N.B. When La Malice was here in the month of February, I told him not to allow any of the women at Trout Lake to embark in the spring, but Dallaire brought his with him, and La Malice himself in course of the winter debauched the woman Blay had, and afterwards prevailed on Mr. MacDougall to sell her to him for 300 livres, and she accompanied him here, but neither Mr. MacDougall nor any other had any such power from me, and I intend that La Malice will not keep her, at least at such a cheap rate. This does not please La Malice, and he refuses to accompany us across the mountains, alleging that by his agreement that he is not obliged to go there or even to winter in any part of the Peace River, and as I had not his engagement, I was obliged to take him on his word, and told him that though much in want of him, that I would not oblige him to go, since he said it was contrary to his agreement, but that he was answerable for the consequences. Sunday, May 18th. Fine weather. This morning La Pistole, who was sent off with Little Head the day before yesterday, arrived almost out of his senses, saying that the day he went off, that he followed the Little Head until he got to where there was too much snow for him to keep up with him, and as the Indians had snowshoes, they soon left him out of sight, and in endeavouring to follow them in their tracks, there being no snow in some places, he lost himself, and had it not been for a slave boy who met him as he was a-hunting, he would not be able to find his way here. I do not vouch for the truth of this story. However, it is certain that the Little Head left him purposely, in order to have it more in his power to absent himself, and not come to the fort until after our departure for above, though he promised faithfully to be back in 3 or 4 days, which promise I am sure was only to get rid of us with a good grace. In the evening the people arrived with all the packs, 6 Frenchmen and 8 Indians, gave each of the latter the value of 2 skins each in ammunition, for bringing over each a pack. The packs were all so ill-made and tied with such small cords that we were obliged to set the people immediately about untying them, in order to be made over again, but it being late, they only made one up. Monday, May 19th. Cloudy weather and several showers of rain fell in course of the day. Early in the morning set all hands about the packs, and they were finished in the afternoon. The furs are really fine. They were chiefly killed in the proper season, and many of them are superior to any I have seen in Athabasca, being quite black and being well dried, excepting that they are not all stretched in the proper shape. Dallaire arrived from the other end of the Portage early, but as he goes out, I hired Maynard to accompany us in his place. Dallaire was willing to go and would be a useful man, but he made some objections on account of his not being allowed to take his woman with him. Another consideration that induced me to part with him is that there is not any other person here with whom I can trust the canoe that goes down. Its load consists of 28 packs. Saint-Pierre, that was here as bout de canot above, was reduced to a middleman, and made to turn off the woman that La Malice allowed him to take last winter at Trout Lake. Previous to these arrangements, I spoke again to La Malice and told him that I was particularly in want of him, and told him to tell me in a few words what he intended to do. He said he knew himself what he was obliged to do, but that I did not, but if he expected the woman he had would accompany him, whether he went up or down, that he would be mistaken, to which he replied that the woman was sold him, and that he considered her as his property, that he was not obliged by his engagement to come to any part of the Peace River, and much less to go farther, but if allowed to keep the woman that he was willing to follow wherever I would lead. I told him that however much I might be in want of him, that I would not embark the best man in Athabasca on such conditions, that however I might concede it as a favor, but that I would not oblige myself, and that he had only one choice of 2 to make, either to accompany me or go to Montreal. After some reflection, he preferred the former, and told me he would go par plaisir but not par obligation, and he immediately arranged himself to be off to the other end of the Portage. But previous to his departure I called him in, and told him that, though I would not oblige myself to embark his woman, that now, since he was ready to go without her, I would grant him permission to take her, but not as his property, however that he might keep her as long as he would remain in that quarter and behaved well, provided she was willing to remain with him, after which they both went off together.